This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt. I'm Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and today I am joined by the Chairman of Susquehanna Valley Center, Mr. Edward Arnold. Hi, Ed. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, Charlie? Good to see you.
Well, we're going to have another Arnold report, but this is a little different than the normal Arnold report. This is a special edition of the Arnold report in light of the fact that we just had a presidential and general election in the United States. So we want to have a special edition of the Arnold report, and we appreciate you being willing to make yourself available for it. I think you would like to start out with perhaps some lessons, rather than we have questions from our viewers, as we always do, having to do with business, economics, and finance and investment, but we also want to talk about the election and the lessons of the election and what it means for our economy and what it means for world and national finance. So why don't I ask you what lessons have we learned from the presidential election?
Well, first of all, I consider myself a realist, and today being a realist, you somewhat are a pessimist. But anyway, I want to warn everybody that what I'm going to say will not necessarily always be positive, and therefore you may be concerned that this will not make you feel good. But in that light, I want to just review American history first. And that is, America was founded, I'm going to say, on basically 5 pillars. You could divide it into different ones other than this, but I think these are the basic ones. Number 1 is freedom of speech. We have, in our Constitution, the most liberal, widespread term definition of freedom of speech. You can say anything as long as it doesn't endanger the life of another. Now, we have now killed freedom of speech, especially at our colleges, because if it's something upsets somebody, you can't say it. Well, that's not what's in our Constitution. That was not the way we were founded. We were founded when people could debate and discuss things and basically be open. The next thing we had in our thing was freedom of religion. Obviously, that was an extreme pillar, since most of the people that originally came here were being persecuted from religion elsewhere, and therefore they came to America to have freedom of religion.
Such as William Penn.
That's correct. And obviously, in New England and so on, people coming from England, everywhere. That's why that was the biggest migration to America, was for religious freedom. Religion is now under a major attack in America, especially more and more our colleges won't allow a religious club because you've got to let atheists in your club and things like this. We basically are saying we consider our founding fathers wrong in that they believed in freedom of religion. The next point is obviously rule of law. And again, I think it's a very, freedom of religions is being destroyed in America. It's a la what the communist governments do to it. Freedom of law, rule of order, not rule of law. Rule of law means that we have a justice system. Every people is basically innocent till proven guilty in our legal system. And overall, that this is, again, a pillar of our society as we were founded. Again, more and more, it's the criminal who we got to worry about. If you riot and steal, if you're somehow entitled to do this, our legal system, if they do arrest you at all, they let you out within a matter of hours. That overall, more and more, there is no rule of law. There should be nobody in prison, and everybody's going to be wonderful, and we're going to go kumbala, I guess, or something. I'm not sure. The next, obviously, therefore, which is somewhat related to it, is law and order. We assume that as part of our structure, you had the criminals would be punished, the people that followed the law and lived a normal life would be able to live that life because they'd be protected by the police.
Well, this is the very basic function of all government.
That's
First
correct.
and foremost function must be to create domestic harmony for the people of that area.
That is correct. So basically, again, the rule of the law and order with if either abolishing the police or restricting them. Obviously, many of our big city mayors have said stand down and allow people to endanger other people because the police are not allowed to do their job. And then the final one, which basically is private property, which is only starting to be attacked now. And I quote from one thing, when a person said, well, what if I call the police and nobody's there to protect me when somebody's breaking into my house? The answer was, you shouldn't even have that house. If you have a house and somebody else doesn't, you're privileged, and therefore you should not have a right to it. So we're really starting to attack. Again, these are all attacks by communism. Communism does not want freedom of speech. Communism does not want rule of law. Communism does not want the basic average person to be safe. And need also private property. These are all the things that we are moving towards and are basically being advocated by our political hard left, which seems to be more and more taking over the Democratic Party.
You know, it certainly appears, yes, that Marxism seemed to be dealt a fatal blow by Ronald Reagan and the Republican Revolution and Reagan Revolution at that time. But certainly since that time, the influence of Marxists, and particularly seen in the founding members of Black Lives Matter, you can find Marxism has had a resurgence, no doubt, in America.
Well, and also, unfortunately, our education system, 99% of our students don't even know who Karl Marx is. That they don't know what communism is because they're not being taught anything. They're not, and also, of course, there was a famous statement, and you might know who said it, but a country that doesn't know its history obviously will no longer, cannot survive as a country. Mm-hmm. And we are now saying we want to destroy our history because we don't like what our founding fathers did. Therefore, we're going to basically burn the books. And that's what more and more we're advocating. Get rid of the statues, burn the books, change somehow, make it like our present people are behaving so well that we should want to emulate their code of conduct.
Well, you obviously are referencing many things that have occurred in the United States over the last year or so. Bringing us up to this presidential election. It's it's hard in many ways to talk about the presidential election at the time of this filming because no one's been certified a winner yet.
That is correct. So therefore, we are going to sort of answer some of the bigger questions here. We may not answer them all. First of all, we may not have the time, but partly is because you're right. Well, the other questions are, well, what if this person wins? What if that person wins? And we don't know. So let's talk about what are the areas, Charlie, is the whole thing, what's going to happen to energy in America? And I want to correct, in my humble opinion, Mr. Biden doesn't know facts. He has a real trouble. I'm not sure what he does know, but his statement that we're going to make this country 100% sustainable and no environmental impact by, I guess, 2050 or something like that.
Or the possible elimination of carbon energy sources.
Carbon, basically eliminate all carbon. Well, let's get the facts on carbon. And the facts are very simply, taking the biggest one, which is our utility companies. And this is amazing numbers, which therefore, again, 2 and 2 does equal 4. Well, I'm not sure it does anymore because science doesn't, a lot of things don't equal anything anymore. But right now, and these are current figures, 11% of our energy is coming from what I call the alternative energy that we want. And that is wind, solar, and some other miscellaneous. And that's all, 11%.
And hydro.
And hydro is another 7%, but we don't want any more hydro. We want to destroy the dams. And the same with nuclear is 19%, but we can't build nuclear because they have so many environmental laws against them. Nuclear cannot be built. So again, I'm back to 11% is what we want to do. Well, even if we double or triple it, well, we're going to increase our electric needs, especially electric cars, which we'll discuss in a minute. Yet we're talking about, we're going to, all of a sudden, he's saying in a matter of 10, 20 years, we're going to be all alternative energy in our electricity. That's impossible. That's where 2 and 2 don't equal 4.
Well, this goes right in line with this question. The question that we received about energy was, since Joe Biden and his running mate, Senator Harris, have been videotaped and observed many times as saying they will eliminate all carbon energy businesses, what economic effects will be seen from the end of fracking, the slow closure of the coal industry, and the end of drilling in many newly opened lands under President Trump. How long will it be until we see $4 to $5 per gallon again for gasoline? And how will the poor deal with higher prices for gas for heating and cooling their homes?
Well, basically, we know that, first of all, they won't outlaw it, they'll environmentally strangle it. So what we're going to do, they're complaining right now that when you have natural gas wells, there's a certain amount of methane gets released. And maybe we can do it a little bit better. But if you say we want to do it, it's a little bit like we've made our cars 95%, actually 98% sulfide free. Well, the thing is, when we took it from being totally regular sulfur fuel down to 91%, it was not that super hard to do. Now to get it from 91 to 99, which is what our goal is, we're only improving it by 8 points, yet we're causing a major, major costly process, and actually we're affecting fuel economy doing this. Now we've overcome a lot of that. It's amazing what we've been able to do. But the thing is, all we're improving by is another 8%. That doesn't make any sense. It made sense to take it from 100% quote-unquote sulfides down to only 9% sulfides. But to drop it down to 99%, you're not improving. Each point is an unbelievably expensive process. But anyway, getting back to what's going to happen, we're going to eventually cause a shortage of natural gas. You're right. The price of carbons will go up, which also will be what we've already talked about, that what is driving our power plants is natural gas. And why is electricity so cheap? Natural gas. It's driving the atomic. That's why we closed 3 Mile Island, because they can't compete. And so if you're going to raise the price drastically of natural gas, you're going to raise the price of electricity.
We only have 2 minutes left in this first segment, but isn't it interesting that the major American car manufacturers in this era of very cheap gasoline have decided not to make any small cars, not to make any sedans, or only 1 or 2. They've all focused on trucks and SUVs. Now, if the price of gasoline is going to head back upwards again, what does that portend for Ford and Chevy and Chrysler when they're just making trucks and they're just making SUVs, Ed?
Well, one thing I will say, which is a very positive, the fuel economy of our SUVs today are amazing.
It's better than...
I mean, basically, most regular SUVs, I'm not talking these 700 horsepower things that can pull a boat or a giant thing, but a normal SUV. I know my SUV, I'm getting an average 26 miles to a gallon. Now, I also drive pretty smart, but my son's got a very high-powered, heavy-duty 254 truck with diesel. He's getting 21 miles a gallon trips. It's unbelievable. His new one, how much better it is than the one he got from 6 years ago or something. So, yes, you're right that the fuel economy on these are less than a small car, but it is amazing how efficient we have gotten. But the other thing, of course, which I think we'll have to discuss in our next thing is, I'd like to lead off with that then, is electric cars and this whole future of what we're talking about there.
Okay, well, let's wrap up right here for our first segment, and we'll be right back with the second segment with Mr. Arnold right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Behind the Headlines is also brought to you by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Pennsylvania Chamber serves as the frontline advocate for business on Pennsylvania's Capitol Hill by influencing the legislative, regulatory, and judicial branches of state government. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. And again, this particular show, we are lucky enough to have Mr. Ed Arnold, the chairman of Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, with us. And we're talking about, this is a special edition that's not only answering questions, but it's also discussing the presidential and general elections as well. Ed, when we took our break, we were at the point where you wanted to weigh in on the role that electric cars will be playing in the future economy.
Well, again, with this whole thing of we got to get rid of carbons, I just want to give facts. President Biden, if you are going to be president, hopefully you're not, that here's the facts. Right now, today, 7.2 million electric cars were built in the world. That is 7.2% because there's about 100 million cars being built. So therefore, the projection is that in the next 5 years, we'll get that up to 20-25% of all new cars, which means 75% of cars 5 years from now are still going to be made by gasoline engines. That we are moving rapidly. That's a pretty big increase to go from 7.2 up to. And in the meantime, of course, there's going to be more cars. It will probably, instead of the rest of the world, not in the developed world, but the rest of the world, specifically China, is going to have more and more cars. So basically, what we're talking about right now is that electric cars, they're talking about by 2040 or 2050, we will be 100% producing. That doesn't mean we're going to, obviously, we're not going to scrap every car that's out there. There's obviously 1 billion cars in the world or some number like that. And they last up to 20 years. The average car in America, which I assume the world isn't that much different, is 12 years old. So if we're going to stop producing our last gas car in 2040, then it's going to be another 12 to 20 years before you get rid of all the gas cars. Mm-hmm. So realistically, if you can do that, and there's another little detail, which is very confusing, I've been doing some work on that, is we have not developed batteries that don't need lithium, cobalt, and nickel. Mm-hmm. Those commodities, if you start to double and triple and quadruple your need, I'm not so sure we can produce that much. We definitely, right now, we have been doing a pretty good job of increasing production, but first of all, cobalt specifically, 60% of it comes from the Congo, which is a very unstable country, horrible working conditions. Most of our wonderful batteries are being mined by little children, 10, 12 years old.
Will we be able to recycle those batteries when those cars are scrapped or not?
That is, let's say, debatable.
Okay. I didn't know, that's why I asked.
There is supposed, on the solar panels, I read an article, I was very surprised that in Europe, they claim we can eventually recycle solar panels. Now the batteries are supposed to last on cars 10 years or something like that. But again, you're right, what's going to happen after that? I'm not totally sure. Mm-hmm. And again, that the charging cycle of cars, and one thing I did just discover, they keep saying the range of a car. This is a little interesting fact I came across. If you're in an exceptionally cold climate, and you therefore have to have your heater on, you reduce the range of the car by 40%. So therefore, and vice versa, if you're in a very hot climate, you have your air conditioner on, which we both tend to have both those on a fair amount, you reduce it by 17%. I was surprised it wasn't more. So when we talk about the range of cars, that's under utopian conditions. And so overall, and now the other thing which we're going to have, by the way, in Lebanon County here, which of course is, we're talking about a lot larger area in Pennsylvania, there are only 3 charging stations right this minute. Only 2 of them are public, one's private. And at this point, I think they are not the state of the art, so you can't get recharged in a short time. There are now electric chargers that can charge a car reasonably, not 100%, but a fair amount, in about a half an hour. That's still it's not like fueling your car, but it is getting there. But it's going to take, again, a long time to have enough chargers that they're everywhere.
That's going to be a budding industry, perhaps, for some entrepreneurs in the future.
Yes.
Moving on to our questions that many other questions that were submitted by our viewers. One viewer wants to know, in the current economic climate, are CDs still considered a good investment? And if they don't invest in CDs at the time, what is a small independent investor to do?
Well, first of all, right now, my statement is because keep your powder dry, because I really don't understand what the stock market's doing. I think it's very highly valued. At the same time, there's so much cash out there. That's when the market's going up. Cash has to do something. And really, the simplest thing to do is to obviously invest in the market. But right now, I would say CDs are fine. Use a local bank, use a bank you're comfortable with, and keep them very short. Because the difference in yield between a under 1 year CD and a 5 or 10 year CD is not that much. And therefore, considering the risk that you potentially, because if things would change, that longer CD, you may have made a mistake. So I would say keep it short. CDs are fine.
Okay. What will the future of Bitcoin and other cyber currencies be under a Biden presidency or a continued Trump presidency?
Under whoever, Bitcoin, cyber currency is going to become the currency of the future. China will be the first country to have a sovereign cyber currency. They're going to have technology they can trace it. That was one of the advantages of cyber. You couldn't trace it. Supposedly China is going to, they're very good at keeping track of everything. And we're, of course, our greatest, Silicon Valley doesn't want to help our government, but they want to help the Chinese government. So overall, is cyber currency going to become the standard over the next several years, whether it's Biden or whether it's Trump? Because if China does it, which we will probably follow.
Okay. With the Biden presidency, will we see American industry stop returning to America from China and the flow simply be reversed? Or will American industry continue the move to China that began under the younger President Bush and had taken off under President Obama?
Definitely, China will prosper under Biden because he's bought and paid for. We know his son is a major partner with the Chinese government, and obviously, therefore, he will probably roll back all the rules and, let's say, dealings that Trump has done and made China be more accountable. He is going to roll back because he's bought and paid for by China. So overall, will American companies necessarily move to China, but they will not move back to America? They'll have a supply chain more throughout the world.
So you think that Biden will have a very close ties to China then?
Oh, he does, and he will continue.
Okay. Would you please tell us about the future of Social Security? What will the future of Social Security be under President Biden or under President Trump?
Again, either one of them. Social Security, as long as the government can print money to pay for it, they will do so. Social Security, of course, is not funded. Almost every other developed country in the world has real stocks and bonds and money behind their retirement plan. We have nothing. So our plan is strictly we owe ourselves. So overall, but there's no question the government will never, I don't care who's president, stop funding Social Security.
Okay, so you think Social Security will be, that will be the, okay.
As long as our government can do it.
Many senior citizens would probably be happy to hear you say that. What effects will occur to our economic system and to American currency if many Americans and many foreign nations no longer have faith in the legitimacy of American national elections?
Well, I do think that we have been the, let's say, place of most dynamic industries and so on, and we're going to be less so. First of all, there's no question that democracy as we know it in America is not going to continue. Obviously, we just had an election where probably 10% of the votes and probably more were either the graveyard or illegals or people that weren't registered to vote. I mean, we have a lot of districts that more people voted than exist. That's pretty sad. Our system is not in good shape. Partly because we put the control of the election to the lowest denominator, where local governments, counties or cities and so on, they set the rules. Or at least the federal government sets its own rules. That's the one failure of our Constitution. We should centralize it, and there should be one voting for the entire country the same way, and should be controlled by the federal government. And we should require proper IDs and so on. That basically, the only place you go that you don't need an ID, there's like 30 different places you do now in the world, whether it's going to a hotel, whether it's going in an airplane, whether it's doing this, you've got to have an ID. But somehow, the important thing like voting, IDs are irrelevant. And now we know from this election, you didn't have to even sign your ballots, and it made them okay.
If, with the possible election of Vice President Biden, should I invest more heavily in gold?
Absolutely. Basically gold or cyber currencies. Very frankly, I would recommend both. Because the sovereign currencies, specifically the dollar, when we're going to print literally trillions of dollars, Biden, I'm sure if they control both the House and the Senate, will have a $3 to $4 trillion stimulus program, and that is just going to be all printed money. It's got to eventually break the dollar.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Arnold, what will happen to Medicare if Joe Biden is elected president? If President Trump is reelected, what changes, if any, might there be to Medicare?
The changes will be very simple. According to Biden, what he's promised will be free medicine for all. Free medicine for all will overwhelm our system. We do not have the capacity. When something's free, you tend to abuse it. If you don't pay nothing for something, you can go to the doctor and it doesn't cost you anything and go. Well, right now, our system operates at probably somewhere between 90 and 95% of capacity. At least that was for the corona thing, they talked about that. And therefore, there's no question we will swamp our system, and therefore we're going to have ration. You're going to have ration medicine. You will not have, everybody theoretically will get a small piece, but we will not have universal health care because we don't have the capacity to provide it.
Somewhat tied to this, and we only have a minute and a half left, and the last question, if Vice President Biden wins the presidency and institutes an open borders policy, what effect would that have on our economy and on poor people in the United States? Would it be good, or would it be bad, or would it make no difference?
America will cease to exist. A country cannot function without borders. So therefore, right now, we are spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars to support illegals already in a lot of the states like California and New York. And so obviously, if you're going to open the world, we're not going to be a country. So basically, whether it's the rich or the poor, America will cease to be a country.
Mm-hmm. Last comment. You have any last thought, last summary in the last 20 seconds about the
hopefully justice
economy
will prevail. We will actually force an intelligent evaluation of our vote counting, and Trump will continue to be the president for the next 4 years.
Okay. On that note, we'll wrap this up, and we'll say that I want to thank you for being with us for this special edition of the Arnold Report, and we hope that you'll be with us again next week. Tune in then.